Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It's a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. That theme song being as irreverent as it is really funny when I'm not really in a reverent mood, because I can feel the emotions of being goofy and having a good time, but then also be sitting around in my reality, which is a very dour and bizarre way to start a show with an excellent guest, which is to say that we're welcoming Mr. Steve Until. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks for having me.
You called me out earlier for using skosh as an official term of measurement, and being officially moved over to the Midwest lexicon as it is, and guilty as charged. You have a killer new record, and it comes with a book of poetry. So the poetry is called Harvestman, but you also have the albums you've released as Harvestman. I'd also like to point out that a friend of mine applies anything with man at the end of it, that you say min, so like Grinderman for Nick Cave's band. He does excellent work. He's a good actuary.
Okay, so Harvestman.
Harvestman, yeah, Mr. Harvestman.
Yeah.
He does excellent work. He's very, very good. Any particular reason? Because you have the record, you have the acoustic record, which is beautiful. It's awesome. And then you have the book of poetry, which is also beautiful and awesome as well. And it's kind of like a co-release. Like those are both came out at the same time.
Sorta, yeah.
So what I was going to ask, was that intentional, or did that just kind of end up working out that way?
It just kind of ended up working out that way. The majority of the entire process of the whole record was largely accidental. I never sat down to create it. I just I kind of learned how to get out of my own way and let it happen. And the poetry book, kind of the same thing, and they kind of fed off each other. I mean, yeah, even coming from the scene where you and I come from, our music, saying the words, I'm putting out a poetry book. Yeah.
Oh, poetry book.
Putting out a poetry book.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to just speak in hushed tones and.
Yeah. So.
And then give some caveat after that too, as if all of us haven't had that moment of self-awareness. But what I like about it though is it's very authentically you. Sorry, just to totally railroad you on it, but a lot of it seems it's like, oh, these very much could be lyrics. But they're presented in such a way that it's the good side of poetry. For me, it's like acoustic albums. I don't like most acoustic albums. And it isn't because I don't like the acoustic guitar, I just don't like the trappings of them. And in the same way, the poetry and prose that I do like, I usually like in spite of the trappings. And I think it works well because it seems very much like it's in your voice. So, was there some trepidation just coming from that punk rock, not anti-poetry, but sort of
yeah, clearly we have we have a poetic tradition. We got frickin' Patti Smith and John Doe, and it's part of our legacy. But I guess we grew up in the more irreverent hardcore era where anything too arty, especially as West Coasters, is like
It's like, yeah. Whatever, Sisters of Mercy.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, the whole record, like, all of it is super out of my comfort zone. Like, as far as where the whatever limitations I might put on my own, where I see myself fitting in artistically.
Sure.
So the record kind of started that. I mean, I first thought I had accidentally created an ambient record. I was at my wife's home in North Germany, where her family has lived for over 500 years on the exact same house site.
That's some homesteading right there.
That's some serious homesteading. And so I always feel like the air is a bit heavier there. There's a lot of kind of familial ghosts or whatever. Like the energy is deep. It's not like, I mean, I'm the descendant of people that just kept moving, kept going.
Right, yeah, exactly. Nomads.
Right. So it's very different, and it's no secret I'm super obsessed with like ancient megalithic sites and pre-Christian cultures and prehistoric cultures, and so that area is just kind of littered with ancient stone stuff. Our grandpa used to ride around his bicycle to have a picnic on some megalithic tomb.
And that's like the resting state, right? That's where that culture that's kind of like, they don't think it's that weird. It's water for them. They're used to it.
Yeah, it's there. It's always been there. So I just had a terrible case of jet lag when we were visiting the in-laws, and in the corner of her childhood bedroom, I had a laptop and headphones and a keyboard, and I played these simple piano patterns, which I would have dismissed had I not been in a hallucinatory, sleepless state as too simple and uninteresting.
Right.
But I didn't sleep that whole week, and the more I explored it, I started adding mellotron and string sounds and some French horn stuff, and still didn't think I was creating anything. I was just with the same way other people might play video games or read a book when they can't sleep.
You're like keeping yourself occupied.
Yeah,
you're keeping yourself engaged. Well, and there are elements to it that are almost like psychedelic or krautrocky almost, right? And have like this sort of, it's like this idea, like this repeated patterns evolving and devolving and changing, that actually when you say it was created in a state of arrested sleep, it makes sense. Like it tracks for that. Like it sounds like that kind of mood.
Yeah, and I think it just, then when I got home and I got into the studio here and started adding some analog synths and filtering everything through my stuff, it became pretty clear that my other influences are leaking out. I've been listening to things like Brian Eno and some minimalist composers my whole adult life. It's just it never had much of an expression. So I accidentally made that record, and it wasn't until I ran it by my buddy Randall Dunn, who recorded my last solo record, and I said, "Hey man, I think I accidentally wrote an ambient neoclassical record, and I don't know what to do with it." Yeah, don't know where it fits.
That's great, but that's that's a wild sentence to have to say, right? Hey,
yeah, I don't know where it fits. Like it's not Harvestman or Harvestman, as you pointed out. Because I didn't feel right to put like fuzz guitars all over it or whatever, so. But I did want to replace the digital piano with a real piano. I did want to.
Did you do like a soft piano?
Yeah, that's where it started. It was just a really kind of responsive, really natural sounding sampled upright piano. So I wanted to get a real one in a decent studio and a real French horn player to replace my just kind of written parts, and maybe some real cello to give some life to those mellotron strings. And so he agreed, but he thought I shouldn't. Basically, his opinion was that, you didn't make an ambient record. You accidentally wrote your next solo record. You just need to sing on it still. And so I disagreed with him completely. But
the devil, you say.
Yeah, but by this time it was like it was winter break from work. I teach elementary school, and so we were visiting her parents in spring break. It was over the following months where I kind of fleshed it out here at home, and then by winter break she was back visiting with her parents, and and I was here alone with the dogs, snowed in here in North Idaho, and
Coeur d'Alene, right? I mean, not to like get
north,
stalkers in.
Yeah, north. I'm north of Coeur d'Alene. You'd have to drive through some areas where city slickers definitely don't want to be driving. Uninvited.
And I bring that up mostly because as a environmental thing, you know, it has way more in common with Western Montana than it does for like the lower part of Idaho, as far as like terrain.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, like southern
that's rugged country.
Boise is like, yeah, that's like when you think of Boise or southern, that's more like high desert.
Right.
You know,
so totally, it's you're talking like this is like straight up mountainous, like
mountains, lakes, forests. It looks a little bit like fjords in Norway or something.
I was just gonna say something along those lines. Yeah, fjords is also just a very fun word to say, so I'm for that. So sorry, I didn't again, not trying to derail from the story, but I think the reason why I bring it up is because anyone's ever been to that area, like I feel like this record is very much vibe-wise kind of what I think about when I go through there, and you know it's always been on tour, just you know going through that bit over into
that's how I decided to look into this area. I was doing the Dawn Drive in like February from Missoula to Seattle, probably in the early 90s, you know.
Yeah.
And everybody else was asleep in the back of the van, and I come over that 4th of July pass and dip down where the lake opens up, and it's like, oh, this is like where Santa Claus lives.
It's beautiful, but like you don't expect it, and if you're sleeping in the van, you might miss it entirely. You know,
yep.
Like it's not.
It's something where roads. If you can sleep through the Rocky Mountains, you're building good roads.
Exactly. but it's where I was going with that is that like the record has a vibe that's very much it's rooted in modern culture, but very much has that sort of mystic might be the wrong word, but sort of like feeling like, you know, okay, something really off kilter may or may not be happening here at the same time. But you have both those things coexisting in the way that it's so overused, but like in the way that Twin Peaks so effortlessly did. You know.
Yeah.
And again, like I actually just talked about how like I hate when people use Twin Peaks to reference things as much as I love Twin Peaks, but I mean.
Well, I moved to the woods on purpose because I like that mysticism of the forest, and you know, like having growing up in the Bay Area, you don't even have to own a coat. You know, I like
you got the uniform, you know,
right.
The sweatshirt.
Exactly. you got to earn your leather jacket because it's freaking hot. But here I get I have 4 true seasons, you know, and they dictate the way your day is going to go if you live out in the country. You know, if you get 18 inches of snow, you can't live your same life you would have the previous day. You've got to deal with it, right. You know.
Going out to go take a walk is probably going to be a slightly different scenario for you.
Put on your snow pants. But yeah, so I mean, part of that is it. You know, I mean and all the words are cheesy. You're right. You know, mystical, spiritual, whatever. But I'm into those connections with the earth and with the seasons, and I like being out here. It's certainly, you know, is kind of what I longed for my whole life living in the Bay. You know, some sort of deeper connection to natural landscapes.
Yeah, and that's something where it you know. They're very different, but it does actually make sense because, you know, the Bay is something where everyone's on top of each other and you know, connecting with each other whether they want to or not. And it tends, you know, because of that, it ends up being like, you know, very much a melting pot of different cultures and different mindsets and viewpoints and things. But it's an anthill. You know, there's people everywhere you look. Like, it's very, very difficult to have like space. Whereas, you know, you definitely want the other 180 now.
It's funny, man. You know, when I first we live on 12 acres of forest, and I thought when we first moved here, I thought, man, that's really a lot. Like, that's a lot of space, and you just adapt. Now it just feels like a large yard. And right. Like I could do 120 or 1,200 to get some more space, you know?
Yeah. Well, and so how has that affected your writing process? I mean, I talked about, not being able to, having to prepare differently when you're going out for a walk in the winter, but I mean, you just like kind of roam the forest. Is that like, I think there's an idea of what people have of everyone in Neurosis.
Creeping around.
Yeah, like big wizard energy, but but like,
yeah. Is this where I should not mention that I've built a stone circle in the halfway through the property? Yeah.
On brand. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, you said wizard, so I had to drop that one. But
why wouldn't you? You've got 12 acres, but build a stone circle, build 20 of them.
Exactly. I mean, the one thing about obviously the vibe has gone from kind of longing to be in a natural environment to I live in it. I just have to open the door or look out the window and I'm in it. But there's always that longing for connection and for deeper connection. And it's always it's not just nature. It's not like, it's more of our connection to our own minds, connection to ourselves. This modern world seems to be pretty good at decepting ourselves and from disconnecting our mental health from ourselves, from each other, from our communities, from our families, so it's still always that longing. And of course there's no lack of longing all of us probably have for some sort of living in a society that makes some sort of sense.
Yeah, someone I know, actually in Oakland, a doctor, she's a therapist, said it very well that so much of our society now attempts to celebrate the individual without supporting the needs of the individual. And that's something that I kind of have chewed on a lot over the years. When I think about just how absolutely screwed up everything is and how screwed up everyone is to each other as like a resting state that, it's almost fundamentally broken. So it seems like being in a position to at the same time withdraw a little bit and have this beauty, this nature around you, but be grounded in such a way that you're still dealing with society, you're still dealing with the teaching year as well as being a creative entity. It almost seems like it might be easier in some ways to balance, but kind of give you just an idea of like the absurdity of the contrast as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I have here is more room to breathe because I still have, the Neurot recordings office is right on the other side of that wall. I'm out here in my studio in the barn. Right. This is where I get to spend the least amount of time because, creativity time ends up being last on the priority list most of the time. Day to day, the day job and being a husband and a father and running a business and, it still occupies the majority of my time.
You barely have time to build any stone circles. I mean, geez.
There's always time to build a stone circle.
You make time for stone circles.
That's right. Yeah. Some things are worth it. Walking dogs and building stone circles. So, so I guess it's more, it just kind of prioritizes it. And I can, as opposed to like, I need to make some time to get out of town. You never find time to get out of town.
Yeah.
So if my 11-mile drive to work is moseying around a country road, around some forested mountains and my walking the dogs isn't around a couple city blocks, it's out through our 12 acres, and there's critters all over the place and that's fun. And
that's your rush hour. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, turkeys blocking the road is like rush hour. So yeah, but I guess so. Back to your question that started all this nonsense was the writing process.
Yeah.
Again, this one was accidental. So, and when now looking back in hindsight, looking back to my entire like solo output, it's all been accidental for the most part, as far as like this process of learning to get out of my own way and not talk myself out of things for stupid reasons and to let them happen naturally and organically. I mean, of course, there's a willpower there to push things forward and make things move, and I'm not obviously not shy about sharing it with other people. But yeah, I had to talk myself into that one, you know, like, okay, shit, I just made a beautiful record which pulled out this different thing out of my voice. Yeah. It's really out of my comfort zone. And then, you know, the book of poetry out of the comfort zone. But yeah, I mean, it even inspired each other. Like, it was through writing so that 1 week where I was on a winter break, investigating Randall Dunn's challenge that I should sing on this or not. I thought it didn't need my harsh croak kind of messing up this beautiful music, and but
I thought vocals would almost take away from it. You're thinking?
I thought so, you know, and so I woke up every morning on that winter break with my cup of coffee and my notebook and my pen, and I just improvised and tore through journals of old poems that I've only written for myself until now, and by the end of that week, I called Randall back and told him he was right to book time. You know, I've got the vocals figured out, but in that process, going back to the book too, I felt so guilty stealing these 2 lines out of this poem, which even though I've never published any poems, so there was no outlet for it, but I thought the poem was perfect.
And as that format, as that thing.
Gotcha. And so stealing the 2 lines out of it, like, ruined it. But I needed him for the lyrics, and I thought, man, I've been doing this my whole life. Maybe I should challenge myself to, as long as I'm challenging myself to go out of the box, maybe I should write some poems with the intent of not butchering them for lyrics for a change and letting them live their own poetic life. And wrote them all in a pretty short period of time. And I realized as they were done, and I had the 22 of them plus the one I stole the lines from, I kept it in there. Thinking it could live both lives. That, you know, well, there's 23 of them. I like that number. That's good.
It's a nice number.
Yep. Wizardy.
It's very wizardy.
I don't know why. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure somebody can explain it.
You know what, dude? Someone's gonna message me about it. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
So I'll share it.
And none of them had titles, so they felt like a body of work. They felt that they had a different, like you said, there's a similar voice there to my lyrics, but the way they own the page is different. Because with lyrics, it sits in a song. It's got to It's got to have a cadence. You know, you got to go, man, do I want to hang on a or a or a e? You know, what vowel sound do I want to hang on while I'm screaming or singing right here? And poetry doesn't have any of that backdrop to help it out. It has to just own that spot on the paper and say everything it wants to say with words and no background music.
It's unadorned, you know. It's naked that way, and it's something where it can be an opportunity because there's certain words that can only sing when there's no music, and it's something that. You know, and that isn't to take away from awesome lyrics that happen when there's other things going on, but when you're dealing with something, especially with Neurosis, where it's so theatrical, and there's such there's a lot of layers to it, right? People aren't always going to be focused on every part, and that's fine. That's intentional. It's one of the things I've always respected about you guys is that with the layeredness of it, everything complements each other, even when they're in opposition. But by the same token, there's something to be said for a beautiful phrase is a beautiful phrase. And it's interesting that, like, when I heard that you did it, I was like, oh, cool, that makes sense. Like, I could see it. You know what I mean? Where there's some... I almost named a name, and I decided that'd be a better idea.
Good catch. Yeah.
I was going to say, if someone, you know, that I didn't feel that way about did that, I'd be like, oh, they are? Okay. That's an interesting choice. But for you, it makes sense because there is such a, like, it almost feels like so much of it is our tales untold from some, you know, not even like arcane times necessarily, but just unspoken part of the world. And to just have them just be there and present is pretty cool. And it works. And it's nice to have that without the context of the music. And I say that as someone that has a little... I have definitely been openly disdainful about certain poetry and prose things in the past, to be sure, even though I
I
respect.
totally understand, and there's certain punk rock part of myself has said very nasty things to myself about the book of poetry. So I get it, man.
I mean, it works. I guess that's the important thing. It's like it works or it doesn't, right? Like there's certain folks that can pull it off, and certain folks who are like, oh my god, no, and that's it works, and it doesn't seem shoehorned in, and it seems like a legitimate contribution to that particular art form, rather than just like, hey, here's like the rock dude that did the thing, and here's the thing.
Yeah, and that's one of those horrible fears.
Yeah, you always have it in the back of your mind of like you don't want to be that
metal guy writes poetry book, like
film at 11.
Yeah, vomit.
Unrequested creative surplus.
Yeah, part of it was like having to like really looking at it, trying to look at it objectively, and thinking, does the world need this out there? I don't know. I mean, but again, that part of me, that punk rock asshole that calls bullshit on everything, the skeptic, can say the same thing about anything I've ever been a part of. I can tear it all apart.
You can relativize that away immediately about anything, and I think it's. But that is interesting, because I think a lot of folks that look at your career and look up to you in your creative works would maybe not realize that you still have those feelings, even when you've got like this great sweeping body of work behind you. And in some cases, maybe even more so, because you start thinking about like, well, is it better or worse than? Or you start playing those weird, stupid games with yourself that when you mention getting out of your head and getting out of your own way with this record, you almost sometimes need those resets just to realize how much of that doesn't matter at all.
For sure. Yeah.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Again, that's part of that, like learning to get out of my own way. Like if I'm not going to own the fact that I have these urges to make beautiful music and poetry at age 50, then when am I going to ever own it? And do you compromise a part of your soul if you don't if you don't honor that muse, for lack of a better word, that kind of, I don't know where the hell all this music and stuff comes from or why I feel driven to make it, but if you don't honor that by shutting it down, then you're like those guys who think they have to give up being in a band because they had to get a job or got married or whatever. Like,
well, I guess it's over.
Yeah, I got married and so the band broke up,
oh my god, don't even get me started on that. We'll be here all night. But I mean, yeah, that's something where, and again, I want to give honor to the art and talk more about how the record itself. But I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, Mike Moraski, about
Love Mike.
Good old Mike.
And I listened to your podcast with Mike, being a big
nice
fan. Yeah,
as am I. I think it was I think it was when Billy was on. I mentioned the Milk Cult song that y'all did, which
with
is
nonsense words. Speaking of
the one
lyrics,
exactly
complete nonsense.
And I got at least one angry email. But why did you talk so much about that Milk Cult record? It was like, because it's my show. Fucker, do whatever you want. But
right.
I was really blown away in a way that I'm often not blown away by, with the I think it was PRI that just you talk to the public radio outlet very frankly about teaching and how that it doesn't diminish you as an artist that you have this day job. In fact, like you look at it as like a part of the greater whole. I thought the whole mindset of it is something that I think a lot of artists feel ashamed to talk about that. And I don't know why. And I thought it was a very unique perspective. And I wonder if you could maybe recap your path into teaching and why that was the thing and how you feel about that in regards to everything.
For sure. I mean, my reaction, though, just like my gut level reaction before I go back in history is just, where the hell does anybody think that you can go make weird ass art and make that your living?
Right.
Like don't you have to? I mean, don't you have to have don't you have to go? I mean, you have to go earn your earn your ability to have time to go make some music or some art, or save up your money to go lose it on tour. Is how it is for most people. I mean, and that's where we came up. I mean, saving up all year to go on tour and lose it.
Yeah, where you're living, you're putting all this work in, so that you can put everything that you have into the stuff that means so much to you,
right?
And not expect, justifiably, not expect to get much back out of it monetarily, but get that enjoyment in another way.
Especially when you're making, freaky, gnarly, user unfriendly, psychedelic punk rock. I mean, it's,
right.
The expectation that art and commerce work that way is a strange one to begin with. I mean, have you had Steve Albini on the show?
Many times. Yeah.
Okay. So he talks really eloquently about that exact thing, very logically. He's got the
for sure
more eloquence and brain power than I have to speak to the kind of underground music and commerce. But I think his finger is right on the pulse. I think it's the generation after ours that started to feel, after like bands like us actually could play real clubs for a change, then people started to get a little spoiled.
Right.
And
you can make a little money on this? Cool.
Yeah, totally. And then you see these greenhorns coming up thinking that the world owes them a living because they make some weird ass music. And it's like, well, world doesn't owe you anything,
Yeah.
Go earn it. So, yeah, I mean, we came up in that whole world, and there was a moment in the 90s where we were touring so much that it was making the jobs we were coming home to a lot crappier. You're looking for part-time work between tours kind of thing.
Right. That's the, I wish I could take credit for it, but that's the at sea mentality. You go out to sea.
Right.
And you come back and you don't quite know how to work it on land, but don't worry, you're going out to sea soon anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Right. So I think there was one point at which it was in 99, and we'd kind of like decided at one point we were just going to go for it and see if we could make it work, and realized pretty quickly that what we were really doing was digging debt and and making compromises, which weren't any big compromises yet, but you could see where people talk themselves into. I mean, you can always hear about, the label made you compromise. I'm convinced that there's especially in our world, there's nobody trying to convince you to change your art. It's your own screwed up mind telling you, I bet we could make it if we just sounded a little bit more like Radiohead.
Yeah.
Or like whatever those weird voices are, like. And so we just realized that for 5 families, and many of us have kids, it just wasn't sustainable to go out there. So that if we were going to be able to sustain this art for the long haul, that we probably should turn the other direction and find a balance, find careers that we could hang on to, maybe even enjoy.
Dare to dream, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I lucked out. So,
I mean, because
find
there's
a
no more
balance.
important job. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like, gosh, more so in these days. Like teaching, like, please, it's like, can we get more awesome people teaching? That would be awesome. Like people coming from different backgrounds that don't have this like same cookie cutter block mentality that with the same shared experience. Like, no, let's get all kinds of different people. And why not people from punk rock? Why not?
Totally. Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. And that's, I kind of fell into it by accident. I mean, I had a college degree just from earlier in life because I came from a family where that's what you did. I got a degree in sociology, which I'm pretty sure you can't do anything with, but it was the
except for teach sociology.
It was the one in which I could combine punk rock with the easiest. Yeah, I could take a psychology course. I could take a recording class. I could whatever. So in California at that time, when we decided to come home and try to find a better balance. I thought, man, if life was different, maybe I'd work with kids, thinking of some sort of crazy outdoor school
this is like what you would be telling yourself, like when you were like thinking of what if I was doing this right now? Yeah.
Right. And I said it out loud to somebody and they're like, hey, East Side San Jose, desperate for teachers. since they passed the 20-to-1 law, K through 3, if you're willing to teach lower elementary and you have a college degree in anything, you'll be in a classroom tomorrow. And you take your
needed people, like,
and you take your teaching take your teaching classes at night for a couple of years and get your teaching credential. I like learning that way better anyway. I couldn't imagine like having to go student teach under some crusty old teacher.
That's a
like
punk rock way. You didn't do it. You just start playing shows, right?
Exactly. You just jump in front of the classroom with 27-year-olds staring at you and go, "Oh, yeah. I just jumped out of a tour bus. I hope." Yeah. I actually had to tune myself in for dropping an F-bomb the first year I was teaching.
Oh, man. Well, I'm sure they haven't heard it.
They got over it. Yeah.
I was going to make a Gilman joke, by the way, but about being in front of seven-year-olds staring at you, but the time passed. I'll just make a meta reference to it. But, yeah, it's something where I very briefly myself, I didn't teach, but I worked in education in a support role, and I always found it so interesting to talk to teachers and talk about their shared experiences. And one thing that all the different teachers from different backgrounds would say is like, yeah, as long as you know who you are and are comfortable with it, like the kids will generally be cool. But if you don't, they'll eat you alive.
They definitely, I mean, all the bullshit armor that we put on as adults to go walk out in the world, whether it's that like ego shit or even the armor of humor, whatever we feel we need to put on to be able to live out there in the world and put up our pretense, they see right through it in a heartbeat. It like doesn't even exist. They have like X-ray goggles,
Right, yeah.
and they don't wear it, and a few do, and those few that do are the ones you really need to reach because they're usually wearing it for an unfortunate reason.
Yeah, there's something going on at home, or
right. So, yeah, I mean, when I was contemplating it, somebody mentioned a fact that turned out to not be totally true, but I'm still sure there is a correlation. Somebody said something that when they started to privatize prisons, that there were these data collection agencies, and when one piece of data that they used to figure out how many empty prison cells they need in the next decade or how many kids aren't reading at grade level by grade 3.
Wow.
And I thought, well, shit, I can teach kids to read.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
you're like, if I've hung out in squats in Austria, like I can teach kids to read.
Yeah, and so if that keeps one kid, in my entire teaching career, I'm 20 years in now. If that keeps one kid out of some sort of trouble, whether it's prison or anything else, if I can give any sort of direction or inspiration anywhere, if some kid picks up a guitar instead of a freaking crack pipe or whatever, that anything down the road, or a kid gets interested in education and maybe doesn't come from a family that is, but lifts themselves up out of a multi-generational situation, anything like that, and then it'll feel like all of it was worth it. And it feels when some people have a hard time, like you're saying, reconciling this like heavy extreme punk rock, heavy music thing with elementary school teacher, and it's like, well, now that I'm in it, it's totally different. Like you look at people on stage or whatever, like superheroes or blah blah, but that's just our friends we grew up with. That's what everybody did. Yeah.
Right, totally. Yeah.
These kindergarten teachers, they're the superheroes because they're dealing with the really little ones. That's a whole other deal. But it just all, I don't know. It's all my life, so it feels like I'm lucky. I get to, not that there isn't BS involved. It is public education, and there are,
right. Yeah. There are challenges, is what the nice way we'll put it.
You've got politicians at the top of that chain.
So there you go. There's your problem.
Yeah. So, but I'm lucky because and even if I'm complaining about running a punk rock record label because I spend all my time in there not listening to records but paying bills, it's still I asked for every one of these things. I asked for an inspired music. I asked for to be a supporter of it, whether making fanzines or record labels or whatever, like that's just always what I wanted to do. And then my day job is also inspirational. I mean, I get the whole human experience in these nice little 9-year-old capsules, to be constantly inspired by.
Yeah, and as far as living a well-rounded life and having lots of different things, it seems like that's not bad, right? It seems like you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I definitely I struck a balance for myself that works well.
I do want to talk a little bit about the label. I think that one of the things that is very admirable for the Neurosis world is how steeped in DIY you guys are, coming from the culture of fanzines and like indie labels and things along those lines. That it wasn't like you were waiting around to be discovered again, talking about like those 90s gold rush days where everyone was waiting for that to happen, but you make it happen. You put the energy and effort into it, and you find things that are worth putting on the line for. And it's something where I didn't quite understand as a younger man. I didn't quite understand like all that entailed and the level of commitment that it is, but how worthwhile it was. And then like, the older I got and the more I saw you kind of expand the circle to include, these other amazing artists and kind of make this umbrella of extended family. It's something that just struck me as very, like one of the things that works within this thing that we do, and how I wish more people did it. But I understand why they don't, because it's a whole hell of a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of heartbreak.
And a financial disaster. But
yeah. And then, I was going to say it, and a complete money hole after that, if you're lucky. But
I don't own a boat or four-wheelers or snowmobiles or any of that, so I might as well, dump it in a punk rock record label.
Yeah, so I mean, where did the will to do that come from? Like, what drove that?
It was multifaceted. Part of it, even from before I joined Neurosis, I was an avid tape trader. I loved the kind of community of discovering underground music. I would get my Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside, and I'd mail order stuff, and I'd be waiting, 4 months for Pusshead to send my record, or that obscure Scandinavian hardcore album that you'd never find.
You just like the band name, like, oh, that looks. I bet that's awesome.
Yeah, I can't say it, but it's got a lot of consonants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't think there's a vowel in that.
Yeah, how do you even pronounce that? Oh well, whatever.
But yeah, I mean, things like even MDC early on with like the Peace Comp, and they brought together like all these bands from all over the world, trippy bands. Like what a discovery thing that was, and the Maximum Rock and Roll radio show. So yeah, I mean, I did a fanzine when I was a teenager, friends and I, and I wanted to do a record label, but then I kind of put that on hold after I joined Neurosis, and we kind of had a plan and we're lucky enough to be supported by, Alchemy Records and Lookout, then Alternative Tentacles, and then we moved to Relapse. And so we had a lot of positive experiences, and luckily we didn't get, not that we didn't flirt with a couple of people in those 90s Gold Rush days, but luckily nothing ever worked out. I think we were too weird for anyone to deal with.
Yeah, I was gonna say that would have been an interesting path to see, but I almost don't really see how you could do it. But then I say that, and then Melvin's got to do it, and like they made Stag as one of their records, which is one of the most bizarre records of that decade. In a
For
good
sure,
way.
yeah,
So
they're one of the few people that did it gracefully, because they're so out of the box that it didn't seem to affect them.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do? Come back to him and say, we need you to write some hits? What would that even, like, but then again, when I think about, like, and it's, because I hate the idea, the sort of, the austerity complex that comes from people that come from DIY, meaning that, like, only things that are small can be good. And it's like, no, it's not good because it's small. it's good because it was allowed to come up in a environment that was fostered by creativity and was allowed to flourish and develop. And I think it's interesting that there is a lot of different paths for like bands that like develop a legacy. And it kind of almost, for Neurosis, it almost seemed to happen kind of like later in like a late career germination in a way that doesn't really happen with a lot of bands. And I think that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, well, I think we never felt like we belonged anywhere, really. You know,
I mean, Lookout. I mean, you think people think of Lookout now. I know it wasn't like that then, but it was sort of like people like associate with just like pop punk, basically.
Right, yeah, Green Day and Op Ivy, right? And then Neurosis. What? Yeah.
Wait, what?
You guys played shows together? No way. Yeah. So, yeah. So it was really just. I guess it was. Even though we felt that we had good experiences with folks, being that kind of people that never felt like we belonged anywhere, it seemed to make sense to go back to that original idea of let's create a home for ourselves for the long haul, where we always know that we can put out our own records and you know, we'll kind of that old world value, or like you see now, more like the farm to table, right? I mean, you buy the art right from the artist. You know, you buy the furniture from the furniture maker. You buy the record from the
get your shoes from the cobbler. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
So it just seemed to make sense with where we were going, and then quickly it was like, oh, and all our weird side project ideas we can do as well, and then that quickly branched out to, and we can offer that same opportunity that we were given by other folks to like give our kind of captive audience like these things that we like, you know, and also framing that also frames ourselves, like that kind of frames our peers as well, more than being on another record label where someone else is framing who your peers are, you know. I mean, it like goes back to that not belonging, you know, like once we got keyboards and samplers and our guitars got heavier, the hardcore punks were like, oh, what are you, Faith No More? What's this keyboard stuff?
Yeah, right, exactly.
You know, so we were like heavy with keyboards and samplers, but we weren't industrial enough to be like old first generation Throbbing Gristle type stuff, and we didn't really fit in with the Skinny Puppy second wave people. Like we were too Sabbathy for those folks or whatever. And I remember Tim Yohannan from Maximum Rock and Roll wouldn't let us advertise when we were on Alternative Tentacles in Maximum Rock and Roll because we were progressive rock. He said we might. He said we might as well be like yes.
Gentle Giant.
No, like yes. I think he actually said yes.
Yohannan, of course he did.
Yeah, so we're like, okay, well, I mean, but Alternative Tentacles at that time felt great because they had VHK from Hungary, they had Zenigeva from Japan, they had Alice Donut, all that. It was so that talk about breaking down boundaries, that was great. That felt like, okay, the more arty angle towards things, the weirdos in the corner, we definitely feel that, and then. When we
the correlating factor, it was good. You know, it was interesting and it was good.
Interesting and good, yeah. And then when we decided to go to Relapse, it was this weird time where, even though we still consider ourselves punks in very many ways, and DIY, to us that was always have an open-minded, do what you want, just do it with passion, and screw everybody. But it turned out punk actually had a lot of really rules, and that it was about super narrow. And at that time, metal was actually opening its mind. And the next thing you know, metalheads are listening to Merzbow and Japanese noise and all this stuff. And you're like, what is going on over here? Like, I still don't understand.
Which is a total flip, and it's almost impossible to explain to. It's almost impossible to explain to kids these days in the scene.
Kids these days will never know how it was.
But yeah, the metal scene was not like that. We'll just go ahead and say for a very long time, and it went from
crappy
cool
like play shows to, you know, like just like with the thrash kind of crossover thing.
Yeah,
didn't really economically, you know, those labels were never punk. You know, it was it was more like still mimicking Big Biz in a lot of ways, and so that was this weird thing where this kind of, you know, and then the younger artists like Aaron Turner and Isis and Hydra Head and all, started kind of like taking this heavy thing and calling it Thinking's Man metal or whatever they were doing back then. And so you had this whole other branch of stuff, but ultimately it was clear we just needed our own home so that we didn't have to define any of that crap or live in any of those umbrellas except our own.
To build your own house rather than rent something.
Right. Although when you have to do roof repair, sometimes you
right. But then when the possums are getting into the tent, it's your problem.
Yep.
Damn possums. But no, it's interesting that it was something where it came out when Neurot came out. It was like there was a defined aesthetic, even if there wasn't a musical aesthetic. Just saying that there's a place that you could have like a Xenigiva and and Neurosis and Tad's band,
Brothers of the SoundCloud, Tarantel,
exactly, Amber Asylum, bands that we're just like, oh no, I can't explain why, but this makes sense, but in a unified aesthetic in the way that before it became kind of like the record label is, that probably sounds like this. That's probably this band.
Yeah, no, I hate that. Yeah, and I like there's festivals like that, shows like that. Like the world gets more pigeonholy, even though it seemed like it should be more open-minded with how much information is out there. But I still like those days where you'd have a band that was like maybe the crossover band, maybe the kind of 77 kind of band, the rockabilly tinge band, the performance artist weirdo. And
everybody's hanging out and like watching each other play.
Right. I like record labels like that. Touch and Go, Discord. I mean, you could say some of those have kind of a sound, I guess, but I don't know. I never heard it that way. I hear there's people looking for, again, like that Alternative Tentacles thing. It's all over the map. You're just looking for something that's honest and intense and compelling for some reason.
I mean, and coming at it from a perspective of being a fan too, like I appreciated the fact that even if I missed those early Gilman shows or whatever, just like oh no, like this is just one of the things I loved about the Bay Area is like, oh, this is the type of place where you could have something where you have all these different kind of bands come together, and then the fact that you did when you guys did the Neurot Fest, as for instance, I thought that was such a cool and natural expansion of the modus operandi of the label. Of being like, hey, like here's all our little family, and like we're all here doing our thing, and it doesn't all sound exactly like each other. Like it's not Ozfest. But, I didn't even think about Ozfest. Jesus.
Nice segue. Yeah.
Which I do want to talk about, but I do want to talk about like Neurot.
That's okay.
I think Neurot Fest is like and there's other examples of it, things like the Pure Barbecue and, All Tomorrow's Parties and stuff like that. But it was sort of like, hey, we're going to make something cool. We're not looking towards like, hey, who can we get that would like pack this place? It was like, let's get our audience into a place where they can experience some cool stuff that they know and some cool stuff that they don't know. And like, let's just have a good time together. And I guess it says a lot to our society that that's just a crazy idea that doesn't happen that often because everyone's constantly, monetizing everything, dollar signs in their eyes about every piece of it. That it was just low of the game from an outsider's perspective, and I thought that was just wonderful. And I went to was it the one the Great American Music Hall? There's one at the DNA Lounge. Like,
those were both of them. Yeah, and then we did a smaller version in Holland a few years after, but. Yeah, we did realize that. Yeah, event booking was not for us. In the long run,
it's a big pain in the ass.
It is a super pain in the ass.
And that was before Noel got he got detained and there was a whole thing going on. But I'll never forget that the Shellacs at the Great American Music Hall one. There was a quiet passage like at that really really quiet like super chimey thing, and like some dude just goes, "Release the Kraken!" at the top of his lungs, and it's one of the it was amazing. Like even Albini busted up laughing because how can you not? first of all, what a random ass thing to yell.
That's a very random thing. Yeah.
But I just appreciated that, like, you know, because I was sort of like, oh wow, almost from the sociological aspect of like, what's gonna happen when, you know, these bespectacled cardigan wearing shellac fans like meet up with, like, you know, the Road Warrior Neurosis fans. You know, is it going to be cool? And, you know, of course it was fine, but like, it was a unique moment.
Don't we all shop at the same record stores?
Yeah, exactly. And it's was something where, I mean, I know for me it was a very powerful moment just because I was like, wow, it's awesome that everyone is here doing the same thing and like having a good time of it, and like there's something being created here, and I think that's really beautiful. So I guess there's not a point there. I'm just telling a story about a thing I went to that you guys threw, but it was good.
So let me chime in with a Steve Albini quote that I remember him saying on the microphone one night at that one at the Great American. Is he was, I think we switched off. One night they opened for us, and one night we opened for them. On the one that we opened for them, he came out and he said, "Well, you know, he thanked Neurosis for having them and everything. And I'm just afraid that after Neurosis, we're going to sound like the Knack."
Yeah, I remember that very well. It was amazing.
I didn't think about it until I'm like, actually, you got moments that do sound a little bit like the Knack. Now that you mention it,
yeah, you know, it's got. I
guess I like the Knack. Yeah.
But I mean, it's you know, there are what a lot of people refer to as the Sons of Neurosis bands. Do you hear that in other bands? Do you hear the influence of what you guys have done, or does it just sound like a similar bouillabaisse?
I try not to, you know, like I like people. It's more like what people say, you know, and I don't know, that's like weird territory to go down to dig through mentally. I think, you know, like, you know, we know what our influences are. We know what riffs we've stolen. You know, so
Ringo opted.
Yeah, you know, just move tiny thing. I mean, I've probably written the song Black Sabbath over about 5 or 6 times by this point.
Hey, but at least you rewrote it instead of just.
Yeah, not even written. No, not even really. Just played it not as well. So I guess you hear that, and you have to be honored that you influenced somebody to want to do stuff. Because I know I have those heroes, you know, those people I saw doing it who made me want to pick up a guitar and do it. So if we inspired anybody to start a band or whatever, then awesome.
Well, and you know, it reminds me of a lot of my favorite bands too, where it's like, if you think like, oh, they sound like so and so, it's like, well, what era are you talking about exactly? You know, because it's like, okay, it sounds like Neurosis. Well, does it sound like, you know, Souls at Zero, or does it sound?
Yeah, it sounds like Killing Joke.
Yeah. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
That's can you be a little more specific? What record? What song? But you know, you guys have a well-deserved rep for just following your own path and following your own North Star and things. But it is, you know, some people don't realize, like, oh yeah, that band kind of started as a hardcore band, you know, like a weird hardcore band basically, and just got weirder and weirder as time went on. And you know, how much of that was just the natural growth pattern, and how much of it was like, hey, let's try something different. And when I say that, I'm and this is going to be a compound one, I think about it in terms of like when you guys made like the accompaniment records where you had like, you know, the Grace and Times of Grace and things like that, like just not even building the worlds, but building the parallel worlds that go along with the worlds. Like, man, that's a big swing. And so is it something where it's as much trying to challenge yourself as it is the listener? When was there overarching patterns for it, and how much of it is a reaction to the world?
I'd say the earliest stuff's probably the most reactionary. You know, I mean, I joined after the first record. So the first record came out, band started 85. I think that finally came out in 87. I remember buying it. I had the demo already from tape trading, and I saw the band around quite a bit. They were one of my favorite local bands for sure. You know, I was big into like Subhumans and Discharge, and so you had these two bands from the Bay. You had Neurosis and Christ on Parade that kind of reminded you of those UK bands a little bit, like that.
I haven't thought about Christ on Parade in a long time, but that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you know, those were my two favorite local bands. You know, but you know, that's just young guys who don't know how to play anything else. You know, making hardcore. You know, and there was a hint of something trippier in there, you know, and then I joined at the tail end of the writing process for the second record, and to me, when I hear it back, it just sounds like Growing Pains. Like we knew we had somewhere to go, but had no clue how to get there. The Lookout album, you know, and didn't know shit about recording, so guitars were all thin, but we knew we wanted to be this more existential beast. We wanted to be kind of the soundtrack to everything, the soundtrack to the end times, to creation, to the existential nature of being human, you know, like
right.
all of it. Like, how do you sound like all of it? You got to get bigger, you know. You got so that, I mean, we made conscious efforts to make sure we were going to have heavier guitar tones, and we needed more sounds. Like, honestly, the biggest mind expanding moment for us was knowing that we needed to get keyboards, but not just keyboards, but sampler, because when you heard Public Enemy, that sounded like riots in the street. Like, how do we sound like? How do we sound like our version of what they're? How do we sound like shit happening? Like the stuff you only heard on the beginnings of albums, like an atomic bomb at the beginning of a Discharge album, or the crazy noise at the beginning of the You know, like how do you just sound like that? Even to grab a Discharge, how do you sound like the enormous door slamming in the depths of hell? You know, like
right. Yeah. How do you get that feeling across? Where do you get that sound?
By sampling that door in hell. And
well,
playing
first
it
you go
back.
down to hell. Then
First you go to hell with your portable recorder, and you tape it and you load it into your 16-bit sampler. But so that kind of exploded the world for us. And then once we realized any sound you could imagine or find could be an instrument, then we were on our way, and that the music got more complex, the writing got more complex. We were pulling more influences of those, like Throbbing Gristle, Joy Division, like the things that we hinted at, but never could quite get there. And we didn't become better musicians, like as far as like chops everyone else would have, but we got more familiar with our instruments and developed relationships with them.
For me, I think Souls at Zero is the first one that kind of seemed like a mission statement.
That's where we first started to sound like ourselves, I think. I can still hear too much cerebral turning on that record. But we were there. We found the sound. But then the Enemy of the Sun, we learned, it's not just that sound. We've also got to like actually abandon consciousness and recklessly let this shit flow through us. And that, and then, you know, we just traversed every rabbit hole that presented itself, which was, you know, the suffocating intensity of Through Silver and Blood, the kind of learning to find room to breathe and times of grace. And then, experimenting, like we had more experimental ideas we talked about than we ever realized, like, you know, wanting to make films and books and,
well, there's a cinematic element to a lot of what you guys did. So, I mean, the film thing absolutely makes sense. I mean, when you start doing the projections and stuff, it's like, oh, yeah, of course they are. I mean, of course. Why wouldn't they?
So it made sense to do those sonic explorations, you know, like the companion piece and the, you know.
Well, so talk about Grace specifically. Like, I mean, because that's another big swing. You're like, okay, so were people like, what are you doing? So you're like, it's another record and you played it at the same time. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, we weren't the first ones to do that. The Flaming Lips definitely paved the way for that one, and we
because they had the
Zerika, four. But we thought maybe 2 stereos would be easier to find than 4.
4 stereos, especially considering that, like, you know, the iPod was still far off on the horizon, let alone like the phone. The idea of like you have to bring in. Well, I got this jam box. It barely works, and one of the speakers is all rotted out. But sure,
right. So we had that Tribes of Neurot project, which was our more experimental like ambient, industrial, whatever. We would just improvise within certain parameters, soundscapes and stuff, and we would perform out with it occasionally, and it was really, we wanted, like, how can it was the same time we were starting our label. In fact, that was the first thing we plotted, was our label, because Times of Grace was coming out on Relapse. We're like, oh, maybe the great kickstart for our own label is this companion piece that's available from us.
Yeah.
So like, and the process, I still, that's one of my favorite recording projects, is that Grace, because it had to be, obviously the mood of the energy of the music has to be complementary, because a Neurosis record is dense, and it did have more space.
There's a lot of density.
It did have more space than previous records. That we did give things room to breathe. So if the Neurosis album had a dip moment, then you had an opportunity for something to come to the forefront and take center stage sonically for a second. But you also realized that you could never be in perfect sync. So I think we gave things 5 seconds either direction leeway time with everything was, so we knew it had to be arrhythmic.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be in key. It had to be sonically complementary. So if there's like a ton going on in the Neurosis one, you're into some big heavy riff, then maybe you just have some complementary harmonics.
Back it off a little bit.
Yeah. Coming through.
Not try to have everyone going for it exactly.
And then here's a quiet moment. Then let's have our sound guy Dave Clark recording himself walking around the subway talking to himself.
Yeah.
On BART, with a portable tabletop Panasonic recorder, and coming back with a cassette with strange shit. And put that in there.
To get some strange shit, BART would be the place to do it, especially back then.
Right. So really, it was just finding interesting stuff and having those things of, like, there can be no hard edits. It has to be all soft transitions. And
the transitions seem like a very important part of the aspect of them being played together, but the whole record, like, it seems like it's all, like, the transitions are very planned out.
Yeah, the Neurosis record was done first, so it was definitely, we finished that first. So the Neurosis didn't play off of the Neurot one at all. It all came second. But
did you think at all about the sequencing when you were thinking about doing the other record with it, or is
no?
That
we made sure that the album stood as we wanted it to stand.
Because that was that the first one you did with Steve? That was the first one.
Yeah, and we did the EP, the Sovereign EP, which came out 6 months later.
Yeah.
And that they were done at the same time, so we knew that the sequence was going to be the LP. And then the EP, and they had to make sense one after the other, like, because it ended with the Road to Sovereignty on Times of Grace, and then Sovereign was the first track on the EP, which also is a first proper Neurosis release on Neurot. So, like, it's no coincidence that it's called Sovereign.
I didn't even think about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of celebratory of that, and so that was a neat era of where it all just kind of, everything fell into place, and there was a nice combination of the gut level, letting all the music flow and letting things happen and getting out of our own way, but also being able to follow these kind of crazy ideas from crazy idea to fruition.
And you did that one. We did the one that part of Electrical Audio and part of Mr. Toad's. Is that right? In San Francisco, or am I thinking of the next one?
That one was part, because we were dumb and thought that we needed to do some stuff locally for some reason. That's before we'd been to Electrical and realized that we just wanted to live there.
That it's kind of like the best studio ever made.
Yeah. Why are we pulling this guy out of the perfect thing he built for himself?
But that said, Mr. Toad's was a fantastic studio, and actually, my Ben used to work there and engineer stuff. And I remember I actually remember very well when you guys were tracking stuff there. I was like, oh, no kidding, that's awesome. But that said, Electrical Audio is pretty freaking cool.
Pretty cool.
And anyway, so so there's a lot of weight. There's a lot of sort of immersion in sound with that. And as you mentioned, Sovereign. Like this is you guys are going on your own as your own entity, as like, and all of the. There's going to be nobody to be like, wait, you want to do what? But by the same token, you got to back it up with the money and the effort as well. and that's a big pull, especially.
And I think that was the same year. That was the same year I did my first solo record as well. So all of
a lot of music happening,
a lot of stuff. Yeah, that was the year I became a dad, and as well. I think Times of Grace, Sovereign, solo record, Neurot recordings, Child. That was a life-changing year.
Yeah, I think even one of those things would have been enough for a lot of people. Had a lot going on for sure. So, I mean, when you think of epochs of the work in Neurosis, like there's always been kind of, at least once you get past the early days, an episodic sort of feel to things. As the different chapters are different. What is it? Books of Blood, Clive Barker. Trying to think of other like short story collections, and I'm blanking right now. But how much of it was? So like that's got to be like 2000, like around that neighborhood, right? That happened?
1999 was Times of Grace. Yeah, 2000 was Sovereign. Yeah.
But it's not like you guys were sitting in your laurels too. Like Sun That Never Sets was like 2001. Like you guys like were just immediately just.
Yeah, that one was
immediately.
That one was pretty quick behind. Yeah, and that was also that period of time where we were searching for the balance of like, let's not tour our asses off and let's, go the other direction.
And that's the one that came with the DVD.
Oh yeah,
right.
We got a new visual guy and put him to task real quick, Josh Graham, and went over the top with trying to create a visual accompaniment for the entire record,
Yeah, mission accomplished. I mean, it was definitely a 360 sort of situation. But was a lot of it? Did you have ideas for what that should be, or was it more like, hey, just dude, run loose and show us what you got?
Well, I think he came up with most of the ideas on his own. There were two other filmmakers who made individual videos on there, but Josh did most of it, and we probably threw our 2 cents in there, and I'm sure we critiqued things along the way, but I think we pretty much let him guide it.
Going back a little bit, when you did do the first record, the first solo record, I mean, it's very different to do that when you're used to having not just a band, but a band that is like such a big presence. Like there's nothing to hide behind, right? Yeah,
and to this day, I
As the Crow Flies. That's the first record, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm still terrified, like, to do it live in front of people. Standing up there with your bros, getting ready to crush everything in sight is way different than here's me and my acoustic guitar. Yeah. Do I need to say something between songs? What should I say?
Right.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, what's up, Mike?
I mean, that was accidental. A lot like this new record I made. It doesn't have a guitar anywhere near it, and I didn't even really mean to make it, and definitely didn't intend to sing on it. That was a case of I'd always had recording equipment. I had a 4-track recorder in high school. I graduated to a 1/2-inch 8-track at one point, and always had a small studio set up at my house. And if I wasn't recording Tribes of Neurot or demoing Neurosis ideas, it was 99 was just kind of the culmination of, for the last bunch of years, I've actually been collecting these weird songs that have no home and that have had no purpose. They're the ones I'd do at like 3 a.m. when the Mission District was finally quiet enough to hear yourself think.
You didn't have
there's probably the gas. Yeah, there's
on their own walking down the street to nobody in particular.
Yeah, if you listen closely on those recordings, I can't hear it because I'm too deaf, but I'm sure you can hear like the gas pumps beeping at the gas station corner from my flat. But so that I just realized, well, shit, I guess these aren't supposed to be songs worked on with anybody else. These are private, they're my own, and they're quiet, introspective pieces that feel like they deserve to be thrown out there.
Did you feel any Any sort of hesitation?
Just like
about it all?
just like with the new record in the poetry book, it felt like, is this too egotistical? Is this like, who the imposter syndrome rages during times like that? Like, who am I to think I can,
right.
Do this? Like, I'm not Jim Croce. What am I doing? Right.
Well, but I mean, but it's good for you to say that, because I think a lot of people, maybe if they don't have that level of notoriety, think that they're the only ones that feel that. And I think it's, I think most people with an ounce of self-awareness has had the, like, should I really be doing this?
Yeah, does the world need to waste any resources on this?
Right, exactly. So I mean, I think it's well, and also, it's a good record. Like, also the music's good, which is also nice.
Thank you. And that I do get enough of those ego strokes, I guess, to validate the fact that I should trust the process more, and I should. But again, it's never stopped me. Right. I was the shy kid who would hide behind a parent rather than approach the guy at the counter to buy a pack of gum. I didn't.
Right.
If I would not raise my hand in class in elementary school, I would die inside if I got called on in class. Like, oh no. But
so it feels even weirder probably to be putting something out and have it be, oh, this is my name. This is
for sure. Yeah. Like, probably the only thing that prevented me from that is the act of actually coming up with a band name is probably one of the worst.
Oh God, it's so
things
bad.
that anybody ever has to go through. But, so yeah, it was just kind of like learning to own it and being all right with it. But, again, like thank you, punk rock, because that's where I took my first band's crappy demo tape and around to skate shops and record stores. And, hey, will you sell my demo?
Yeah. with the unearned confidence of the young, where you're just like, hey, let's do this. Why
you go talk to him. No, you go talk to him. No, you go talk to him. All right.
Before you have like some friend be like, oh, you talked to so-and-so? Like, yeah. Like, oh wow, I never even thought of talking. I'm like, oh, okay, well,
yeah, you can call this guy and ask to play the club.
Just a dude. I mean,
yeah,
just a dude. So then, the second record that's the one. That's the one that's got the poem at the end. It's your
my grandfather.
Your grandfather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so was that a thing? Knowing nothing about your grandfather, was that a thing that like he did? Was he a poet? Was he?
He wasn't a poet, but he recited poetry. He had poems committed to memory.
No kidding! Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And I was looking for one. I remember him telling when I was a kid. It's Robert Service poem, "The Cremation of Sam McGee," which was kind of humorous because it's about a guy dragging his dead buddy's corpse through the like Klondike, gold claims in the Yukon or whatever, and just cursing his name as he's dragging him, to give him a proper burial or whatever. And the guy comes back to life when he puts him in to be cremated, and he comes back to life. He just wanted a free ride. So, but that's the only poem I ever heard him. I remembered him saying, and so I was like, how am I going to integrate this kind of comedic poem?
Yeah.
Into something serious, but I'm sure there were some lines I could loop, and I never did find the recording of that poem. But in digging through my dad's reel-to-reel tapes, I found because my dad had a TIAC reel-to-reel that he recorded.
Oh, like one of those old school ones. Yeah.
And I found this one of him reading the Harpy, and like that
cool.
was like gold. Awesome. Like man, that's like that's not
Stop
funny at all.
You hit gold,
yeah. It's dark and contemplative and deep, and
it's a great closer,
meaningful. And so I think me and spacing. Who would I record it with?
I can look it up.
Yeah, brain. 50-year-old brain moment.
Desmond?
Yeah, Desmond. We manipulated some of the backing tracks from one of the other songs and created that trippy background for it. That was a nice kind of moment, which ties into a lot of those themes I deal with most of the time anyway, of roots and
it seemed to it followed. Yeah, I don't want to say the narrative structure, but it followed the mood. It followed that same North Star that has been a through line through a lot of the music. And it's a good record. Again, that's good. And again, that's I mean, those records are like, I use those as examples of like how to do it right when I usually am bitching about somebody that did it wrong.
Well, thank you. That's an honor.
And then so around that, when did you guys start in with the record Jarbel? That was 2003, something there.
That was like a down. I think a down period where we weren't doing a whole lot and weren't writing or touring, and we wanted to just throw a wrench in the work, and so we didn't actually want to write a record the way we had before. We went into Mr. Toad's. Noah and I went into Mr. Toad's with some of the reels of past Neurosis records, and
interesting. Okay,
and we just put up Jason's drums and pitched them down, flipped them backwards, looped them, cut them up, just to kind of give us like a rhythmic start instead of a riff.
So you're starting it literally from the floor up. You're starting with the drums,
right? Instead of like trying to pitch everything to a guitar riff, it was like let's do something more rhythmic. And we're overdubbing in Noah's living room with small amps and doing weird stuff, and we didn't want it to just be the next Neurosis record with somebody else singing on it instead. We wanted to pull it out into something different, and I think it worked. We came up with some interesting stuff that we wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, totally. If it suffers from anything, it suffers from the quality of digital home recording at that time. I got physically ill when we mixed it, even though I don't hear those high frequencies. Shitty analog to digital.
Oh, the converter.
If it's a shitty converter, I get physically sick.
Yeah, because there's that I don't know the frequency range, but there is that like super high frequency, like the dog frequency.
Yeah. I had like a horrible headache, and it was just awful.
That sucks, man.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting record, and it was something where, for me, I think that was the first thing I ever heard Jarbo do like that, and that was like it's interesting to hear something in a different context that way.
Yeah, and she's a really unique singer. She's what we really like about her is her ability to embody what she's singing. Like she really becomes the song. She becomes the music.
She occupies it. She lives it. Like it's. You never have to worry about if she's gonna sell it or not. She is
for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Respect. Yeah.
Yep.
So then, so the Lashing in the Rye record, the Harvestman record, when did you decide it's going to be a band name rather than just under your own name?
Well, because I was doing this other. It was like the home recording situation where clearly now I'm in this room surrounded by synthesizers and amps. It's clearly become a problem by this point. But I was doing a lot more home recording that didn't have a home. It wasn't Tribes of Neurot. It wasn't Steve Von Till because it wasn't kind of acoustic based. It wasn't songs. They were more like improvisations. They were like psychedelic. It was a place to kind of cram everything else, like obsession on ancient European mythology, fuzzed guitars, lo-fi recording, trapping abstract crap in analog delays and letting it go forever and playing guitar on top of it, or all the weird stuff that didn't have a home kind of congealed into this I don't know, psychedelic treatment. My love for dub music, which even though I don't actually make dub music, like that idea of the studio is the instrument and whatever you tracked doesn't even matter. you
right, because
manipulate it
you're
after.
going to change it in the course of...
I am going to screw that. Yeah, screw that thing up. And sound manipulation. So all of it. So it's kind of where the ambient, the psychedelic, and the home recording, all of that kind of just congeals. Fuzz guitars, synthesizers, or Tangerine Dream and Brian Eno crash into Skullflower and Flying Saucer Attack or something.
Yeah.
So I needed a name for that.
Way different. Yeah, it makes sense, but I'm always curious where people have the dividing line in their own mind. That's more like I come in here, I turn the power on, and I just start screwing around. And except for this new Steve Von Till record, that turned out to be the new Steve Von Till record because guitar never got picked up, and it became this other thing. And Randall Dunn became the voice of the Muse for a moment and challenged me to sing on it. But so yeah, it's with this new record, it wasn't always clear, but a lot of the times I'm clear on what's Harvestman. I come out here kind of, and I'm staring at my Neutron biphase or my, filter machines, and I'm like, okay, let's. Yeah, we're digging into it tonight, guys. Right, exactly. So yeah, and I don't want to miss I Have Every Storm too, because I feel like that's an underrated record in the Neurosis pantheon. But it kind of seems like God, what was there was. I'm trying to remember. That's when all the bands that like ripped off the One Gang of Four thing were like kind of becoming popular, like around that time period. Like it was just such a bizarre and like absurdly silly time in music, but it almost seems like that one had like a big folk element to it as well, in certain ways. I never the Neurosis meat grinder.
I see the folk word like dropped a lot, and I see that more in the Souls at Zero than anywhere else, where we had goofy flutes like Muraski. Dude, going back to me, he's like, man, I really like what you guys are doing with Neurosis. After we kind of changed, and became the apocalyptic ding dong thing. But right. But he's like, but I don't really like those Hobbit parts. And he's.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and when you listen to the strummed acoustic guitar with the flute come in, you're like, oh yeah, well you're right. Maybe we didn't need to do that, but I guess we had to get to the next place.
Fucking right out of the Shire. The Neurosis.
But the way I see I Have Every Storm is that whole thing we discovered in Times of Grace, where we were learning to like let things breathe. Mm-hmm. I Have Every Storm was like taking that as far as we could, I think, in that direction. Like as much as Through Silver and Blood was the most suffocating, dense, like relentless,
super hyper dense.
Don't ever let them up to breathe. If they think about it, beat them back down. Why do something 4 times when you can do it 64 times? Whereas I Have Every Storm was space and lots of space.
Yeah, it is a very spacious record.
Dial back the distortion. Anybody who's listened to enough rock records knows that like the most fuzzed out guitars are not always the heaviest,
Right.
And a lot more synthesizer. I go into classic synthesizer sounds, and maybe leaning on our Pink Floyd pretty heavily on that one.
It is kind of a Pink Floyd record, but almost like a metal era Pink Floyd record. Like
we're almost exclusively pre-Dark Side.
Yeah,
post Sid. We're not hipsters, so we don't. We like the mythology as much as anybody else. But Live at Pompeii is the era because that's where they're doing the best stuff. Umaguma metal.
Yeah, man.
It's all the best songs of those several years condensed into one set. And
I actually swore as a dumb young punk rocker, I swore up and down I didn't like Pink Floyd until I was shown Live at Pompeii. I'm like, okay, I like Pink Floyd.
My first tour with Neurosis in '89, we took a VHS copy with us, and we were like ministers of Live at Pompeii. Everybody's house that we stayed at, we made them watch that. We're like, you got to check this out, Live at Pompeii.
I love that the one Nick Mason close-up he gets is when he drops the stick on, and then you see him kind of like, and he picks it right back up again, but it's like that's his one close-up, and he must have been like, son of a bitches.
What about that butterfly shirt, though?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that butterfly shirt's amazing.
If that like if it wasn't so badass, it would be like Spinal Tap worthy for all the moments. But it's like, oh no, this is a band that's the peak of its power. Like
those. I mean,
that's amazing. And
Roger Waters doing that high pitched scream. One of these days, or careful with that. Wow, all of it just so gnarly.
When I love the idea too of like they were doing this as like we're gonna go to like the weirdest, coolest place and just make a neat thing, and like there's not an audience, like we're just doing the thing. And I did
a talk about it with somebody recently, and the podcast host referred to it as playing into architecture.
Ooh.
And I was like, oh.
That's good. That's solid.
I was like, that's the name of your book analysis of Painful 11 playing into the architecture. And it was a perfect description because
it works. I mean,
because that's why those performances are better than the album ones of the same song. But because I think they're getting a feedback from the place. They're getting not from an audience, but from the structure itself.
That's interesting. I have to think about that. That's an astute take. So there's a lot of hot takes out there, but that's an astute one. So
astute take.
So then like get back to me about the rest of the Harvestman records, because it's okay. There's a, for me it almost seemed like there has been kind of like anytime you get repeated rhythms, people always say krautrock. Oh, it sounds like krautrock. Well, what does that mean, right? Does it sound like Amon Duel? Does it sound like Kraftwerk? Does it sound like Ennui? Like, but repeated rhythms, usage of technology in such a fashion.
Sure, and that is absolutely so it's in some ways it becomes like a shameless kind of tribute to space rock, krautrock.
Yeah.
Like I said, Tangerine Dream. The synth stuff, manipulating sounds, there's a part of me that has this kind of genre of music that nobody else classifies, where that certain era Tangerine Dream and the first two Ennui records and
Ennui 2 is my jam, man. I freaking love that record.
Absolutely. And Cluster and Eno, and I can draw this parallel that goes all the way from those into Skullflower and Flying Saucer Attack, which I think I mentioned earlier. And I could imagine
that's like creating the extreme end, but
creating some ultimate goal of all of that, like getting sent to Adrian Sherwood's dub studio to get remixed.
Go fuck this up.
yeah. Just take this out of all context and bring up what sounds interesting, and put just whatever you do, put it through tape delays over and over and over again, and then filter those. So it's a love for the process and a spontaneity and letting go, and then carving it into something at the end. All of the arrangements happen in the mix, where it's just take all this random shit. And it can live from years to years. I mean, there could be something that's 10 years old that rises to the forefront of the next Harvestman record or whatever. You never know. And then,
so how do you organize that? Like, how do you have like just
don't
like? I mean, but seriously, like where when you decide, this goes in this hat, this goes in this other hat, right? Like where do things sit around for a while where they figure their own story out, or is it something that's driven by external pressure?
Harvestman sits around and just bubbles up as it wants to. Like, I wait till things feel like they belong together,
okay.
And grab some things that feel like it makes sense. Like I'm working on a triptych of actual dub mixes of some tracks, and so there's these series of songs which kind of belong together. And so I was digging through old stuff of like, I've got those other 3 homeless songs that could be one on each of the triptych because they're all related from the same period of the same sonic registry.
Cool.
And
okay.
And then finding several versions of that so that, I don't know. Then it all just comes down to, in the end, what sounds good and what sounds like shit. Cut what sounds like shit, leave what sounds good. And, and all that. And then that reminds me at the very beginning of when we were talking, you're like, how you have a Harvestman project. How do you end up naming your book Harvestman?
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
and I was thinking I needed a title for the book.
It's a cool name. I mean, don't get me wrong. You got a cool
name.
Get the name.
It just made sense because it's like an alter ego name.
Yeah.
I need a cool name for a book that represent, and I feel like it does represent the poems. Harvestman as a word represents those poems, and
it fits the modus operandi. It fits the mood. The words evoke. Like it's very fitting.
Yeah, and the way the record and the book kind of, or the way the record kind of inspired doing the book by stealing the lines, and all of that just comes full circle. So it's like, hey, this is my output. This is what I do. This is what I'm doing right now.
It's interesting to hear the story behind it coming together too, because there is a patience to it. Like there's a like, it doesn't feel like anything's being pushed at all with any of it. Like, it's very deliberate. And it's something where I was either like, this is either really meticulously planned out ahead of time or completely by accident. that this is the way that it went. But it works perfectly, and it makes for it's I think mood music is overused, but it's a moody record, and it's something that I think it's hard to make moody records that are anxious. Unless you're trying to make an anxiety-inducing record, but like if you're, which is a different kind of mood. But right. I mean, it hits the mark, is what I'm saying, and it's something where there's a lot of ways it could go to it. But when I think of those more spacey, not necessarily in terms of like space rock, I mean maybe a little, but like in terms of there just being more open space Neurosis records, and kind of like maybe taking some of those lessons learned and applying them in a smaller format, it makes sense. Like the way it fits together, it makes sense. You don't have to have, it's not the Silver and Blood, why do a part, was it 4 times? You can do it 64 times, like that. It's not working too hard to achieve the goal, but by the nature of it being more relaxed, it actually helps complete the spell, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it was, it materialized by deliberately not being deliberate, but I don't know, just giving it space to become, like I think, circling back to that idea, like not getting in my own way, not talking myself out of it, but also not even knowing what it was, and but revisiting it every once in a while, like, what is this? This is curious. And, it kind of reveals those deeper levels of what we've been discovering all along from the young guys forcing it out, as gotta get it done, and then to just hey, trust the process and let things take shape.
Yeah, it makes me think about I think it's a Jim Carroll piece where, it's been years, but it's something along the lines of like just feeling like he was going to run out of time to do the things that he wanted to do. And that's such a young man, and a young man specifically, way of looking at the world. And it's fascinating to me that with your music, be it with the solo record, with Harvestman, with Neurosis, like it's still managed to be intense and to be very real and to have this unified aesthetic and be heavy in different ways. But it doesn't seem like there's I'm going to run out of time aspect to it at all. But when there is, it's like seeing the same phrase but with a different context years later. And there's a wisdom to it on this end that I think that I don't know, it works is what I'm trying to say, but like it's aging and taking it all in as time has gone has seemed to been something that not every artist can do that effectively. Some people reach their nadir very late in life. Lots more peak pretty early. No names mentioned. But
Yeah.
I think, but in all seriousness, there is a, the first things people want to do when they hear a record like that, it sounds world weary. But it doesn't sound world weary. It sounds world aware. The world is wearying. Like, it doesn't sound, but it doesn't sound like a weary record at all. Far from it. And I think that's that vitality that happens. I think that is a big key to why people connect with what you guys do. Because when you think about the vast and diverse crowds of folks that have made the music of Neurosis and all the various bands and things along in the Neurosis circle part of their lives, it's there as a constant presence, and it's something that they get to grow along with music. And I think this is not something that you get to do. or let's put it this way: most artists wouldn't know to try or wouldn't have the ability to try. It's such a unique thing, and it's very laudable. And I'm articulating this poorly, but what I'm driving at is that, when somebody says a mature record, that usually means Run for the Hills. But it's a mature record, and I don't mean that in the way that people say that. But it's a cool listen. Like, I feel like it's something that, like, what do they call them? Zoomers, like a millennial could, like, pick up, and then, if it's the right person, they're going to get something out of it that would be very vital and important to them. But then I know a hardcore kid from the 80s could, like, pick it up and also be like, oh, this is cool, I'm getting something else out of it. Or maybe the same thing. And I don't know, man. It's a hard needle to thread, and it's. I guess there's not really a question here. This is more just a soliloquy of sorts. But yeah.
Well, I think that just somehow we stumbled into some source of inspiration that felt like it was for the long haul and not for a quick burnout. Like once you view it as a place that has no final destination, that it's a journey. Like, that's every way I say this is cheesy, so it doesn't matter. But
no, I say worse every day. Don't worry.
So I mean, once you realize that it's like the quest for the Sonic Holy Grail, and you're going to die not having found it yet. It's like so
and being okay with it, or like
being okay with it because it's all about the trip, and it's all about what going on and discovering things along the way. So I have to always believe with that approach that the best is yet to come.
Well, I mean, this record is great. That last Harvestman record is great. That Neurosis record that came out a few years ago, it's awesome. I mean, it's like you could just make a Silver and Blood Jr., right? Easily.
That would suck.
But it would be ridiculous. Like nobody would wanted that. So like, I mean, I think that's it's hard to pinpoint because you guys are very much of the underground, but you just kind of developed your own world. There's a lot of world building that's gone on with be it the label, the band, the various other like projects and bands. There's a universal constant to all of it, and it's it's like an expanded universe. And most bands have a hard time putting together a good record, so it's like, it's a laudable thing, and the fact that you live it, and also everyone counterbalances that with family and with living a regular day-to-day life like every other person in this screaming, flaming skull horror show of a world that we live in. It's I mean, do you look at it and does it feel like, oh, that work is good and I'm happy where I'm at? Do you think about like things that you're like, I wish I would have done that here?
There's always a little bit of that, like, oh, wish something could have been better or executed in a different way or recorded better, or I don't know, any multitude of things. But then you've got, I go back to that time machine paradox. If you change one thing,
right,
the entire
butterfly effect,
the entire future it becomes different. So in that regard, I have
suddenly it's the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, shit. We definitely shouldn't have remixed that record. So really, like, in what time has offered me is a sense of gratitude. I am grateful that I've met the people that I've met to make music with. I'm grateful that I've been a part of this DIY music scene where we have comrades all over the world with similar experiences, and that have had this opportunity to travel and make music, and that we have everything about it is just something to be grateful for and not to take for granted. And I think looking at things with gratitude still allows for a space where you won't allow yourself to rest on your haunches. You won't. I don't ever feel I'm too whatever that drive thing is, whether it's like, trying to overcompensate for that feeling of not being good enough, or the imposter syndrome, and like, fuck it, whatever the drive is from each of us that takes us to that extra level to make these things a reality. That's part of it as well. And so just kind of accepting all of it. And I don't know, just being into all of it, like the act of creation of all of it is wonderful.
Well, and you've been just like it's been wonderful talking to you, Steve. The one thing I do want to say though is you guys got it's the longevity of Neurosis is so interesting and unique, and even everyone like living in different places now and having all these other things going on, like life things and other projects, things along those lines. I mean, when you get back together and it's time to play, and you're sitting there looking at Scott and Dave and Jason, Noah, etc., and like, what are your thoughts? Are there thoughts? Like, does it feel like a family? Does it feel like war buddies? Does it feel like all of those things at once? Does it feel like none of those things?
Probably all of those things at once, like dysfunctional family and war buddies. And I mean, because we spend a lot of time apart, and I think that's part that also plays into the longevity. I mean, you don't have to be on top of each other or go to band practice 3 days a week, yell at each other.
Yeah.
Right. We can not see each other for 6 months, 8 months, and then it feels more special. Like, oh yeah, because you have this shared life. You've experienced things that most people don't get to experience, traveling around the Western world in vans, making punk rock music, and seeing the shit you see on the streets between the hours of 2 and 6.
Sometimes literal shit, actually, too. Yeah.
A lot of times, especially in San Francisco.
Yeah, I was gonna
say. So yeah, it's just kind of all that. You've got these men you've known your entire adult life, and you have a shared experience that is hard to even communicate. I try to talk to coworkers, who've lived, for lack of better term, not all of them. Some people have done some crazy stuff or whatever, but they haven't lived in punk rock bands. Right?
Normal human stuff, not band stuff. Yeah.
Right. And so to try to even explain, well, I'm in this band, they're like, oh, cool, you guys play around here? Well, no, not exactly, or like, yeah, my brother's got a band. They're like, dude, Doobie Brothers, so yeah, not really like that either, but
sort of like asking what Frodo did on a summer vacation,
Yeah, well, it's like that. What'd you do over the weekend? Oh man, I watched the game and whatever. Oh, that's cool, man. I flew to Holland and played a festival.
And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
So it gets a little bit weird that way. And so really the only people you can share that experience with is people that have that same thing. So
fellow travelers. Steve, I'm so glad that you did this, and
me too. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being mindful of my schedule and the recent tragedy. And I was been looking forward to this for a long time, so I'm glad we got to do it.
Yeah, me too, man. And I'm sorry for your loss. That's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guilt in the lily, but this stuff happens. It especially happens for people that play rock and roll, and there's no other way to say it.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It always just brings up I think some history of rock and roll documentary somewhere where they're interviewing. Oh, here I go again. It's Pete Townsend, and he was talking about the history of rock and roll as just I forget his exact words, but it was a line of corpses or something. It was it was just brutal. It was all my friends
completely dark, but
all my friends are dead.
Yeah,
Shit.
Yeah.
I guess hey, but that happens in life, so we gotta take every day as it comes. And
well, it's why it's important to appreciate the people in your life while they're here too. And
for sure,
that's something I try to take away from all this stuff, and a way I try to live all the time.
Yeah.
Last thing, because this would be a depressing as hell way to end a very nice conversation.
Yeah, let's not do that.
You kind of already articulated this, so you can take this however you want, but you've heard the show. I end the show by asking people, why do you do what you do?
Because I don't know how not to, I guess. I mean, I didn't do my homework for that question. Yeah, I can't imagine a life where, I don't know. I can't imagine a life without it. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't need to be an essay question, so that's
good, because that was a shitty answer. But I don't know how to articulate it. I mean, it's been.
You don't have to. It's okay.
Yeah, it's just it is what it is. It's I have no clue what life would be like without creative outlets like we've discovered.
Steve Antil, No Wilderness Deep Enough is the record, and Harvestman. There's a subtitle. It's something or other, blah blah blah.
23
blah.
untitled poems and collected lyrics. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Both available now. Should people get that at the Neurot site or wherever they're
Neurot site or vontil.org, which links you to the same spots. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I'm a dude that has limited patience for both of those things, and I think they're both great. So take of that what you will.
Thank you. That means a lot, and thanks for having me on the show. I listen quite frequently, so nice to be here.
Well, right on, brother. It's been glad to have you, and yeah, let's anytime you want to come back, open invite.
Fantastic. Right on, man. Take care.
Right, dude. Take care, Steve. Oh, there he goes. Let's play something off of the new record. Why don't we, huh?
Tore apart your altar to the void. Standing as an oak, holding ground. Seek shelter in surrender, but don't give in.
Is this thing on?
Well, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Steve Until, man. What a guy. I'm real glad that we did that. And that was that feels very appropriate to me somehow as being the first episode back after the tragedy somehow. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
are we going? Is this thing on?
That's how my brain works. Get all that stuff in the Neurot Fest, Von Til, vontil.com, I think. I'm not kidding, man. The record's good. And if you're remotely the kind of person that like to have a book of that kind of stuff, it's solid as well.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day.
The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal.
This is my farewell transmission.
You can find this show on radionope.com, Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific.
Mr. and Mrs. America, all the ships at sea.
All around the world, Spotify,
The sound of my voice.
Stitcher, Pandora, all the things. All the things.
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal to get episodes of the show sooner. $1 a month will get you there. No ads, no sponsors. No kidding. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. James Williamson next week of Iggy and the Stooges.
Into electricity.
What?
Can you hear me now? Out on Route 128.
Stay safe.
Dark and lonely.
Take it easy.
I got my radio on.
Take it easy.
Can you hear me now? 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 The end of radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd
like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency, hey! This is a real goddamn emergency!
Oh, cool. What's coming up?
Dude, I've got James Williamson of the Stooges next week. Yeah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? I'm surprised it took this long to do it, but I'm really glad that you did it. And I do mean anytime you want to come back, any fucking time, man. Just let me know.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
You can just be on the fly on the wall when James Williamson's on. Like, hey, what's the dude with the beard?
You told me I could come back. Yeah. That's cool. You guys talk. I'm just hanging out.